Hello, Links community. Jeffrey Cranford here, and we've got something really special over the next few weeks, bringing it to you from La Quinta, California. Recently, we had Lee Strobel. Many of you know Lee. Maybe you've even read his book or even given it to somebody you play golf with. Case for Christ, New York Times bestseller. I think he's sold over 14 million books. And he was with us here, here in the desert, and he did some profound things. And I want you to know, look, we've been talking about evangelism. And now in talking about evangelism, many of you may say, well, I got John that I play golf with, or I got, Sarah that I play golf with. And I talked to her about, even invited her to one of our fellowship groups, and Jesus just said, yeah, I'm not interested. And so it's kind of like, okay, case closed, it's over. Well, you have some allies in this. And also, you need to be equipped in this. So we want to help you over the next few weeks through Lee Strobel talk about 4 different things. We're going to talk about execution. We're going to talk about early attestation to that. We're going to talk about an empty tomb. And then we're going to talk about, there were eyewitnesses. Now, some of you may be pretty versed in this apologetics. Some of you may not, but I think this is really going to encourage you. And who knows, you may even pass one of these on to one of your friends who maybe claims to be an atheist at this point. So I hope you enjoy this with Lee, and we'll bring this to you for the next 4 weeks, and then maybe even have a 5th week. I ask him a few questions individually. So hope you enjoy. Stay tuned. Really listen to Lee. Think you'll learn a lot.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks. That's very kind. Good to be with you. How many were at the Apologetics Conference? Oh, wow, quite a few. So I can't use any of my jokes that I had. So the rest of you, trust me, I got some really funny stuff you would have heard if these guys hadn't gone to the conference the day before. No, actually, we had a great time at the conference, and I think it's an annual event, isn't it? So next year, if you didn't go this year, it might be a good opportunity to attend. I noticed at the conference, some people had name tags on, and I thought, the world would be a lot friendlier if we just had name tags and wore them all the time, wouldn't it? But, hey, Bob, yeah, hey, how you doing? But we had an embarrassing thing happen. We were doing a conference in England. Printed up everybody's name tag in advance with their first name real big so people could greet each other. People came in, they registered, they got their name tag, they put it on, they went into the conference. We thought everything worked great. So about 2/3 through the day, this woman comes back up the registration desk and she's all upset. We said, what's wrong? She said, my name has been misspelled. And we're thinking, okay, is that a big deal? We said, what's your name? She said, my name is Sylvia. And sure enough, she'd been walking around all day with a name tag that said saliva. She was spitting mad, I'll tell you that. Anyway, so Leslie and I, my wife Leslie is here, by the way. We just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And so we moved to Houston, and I mentioned this at the conference. Why would you move to Houston, Texas? Really? And one word to explain it, grandchildren. That's where our 2 oldest grandchildren are. So we moved there not long ago, and we got our phone number assigned to us for our home phone by the telephone company. And you're probably thinking, okay, big deal. Yeah, it was a big deal to us because in Chicago, the phone number they had given us for our home number was 1 digit away from the cab company. Seriously. So 2 in the morning on Saturday night, these drunk guys would call from bars and, trying to get a ride home. And it was bad enough getting wakened up in the middle of the night, but then you had to get up, get dressed, get in the car. It was such a hassle. So I think we got a good number now. I think it's gonna work really well. So it's an honor to be here. I didn't see the red door, by the way. Is there a red door? Am I missing something? We pulled up, let's look for the red door. Really? Okay. We're wandering around the parking lot. Anyway, we are honored to be here, and I get to go see my son is a professor at Biola University, a theologian, and we get to go visit him a few minutes on our way home as we go back to Denver, where we also live because of our center there. But I thought, and prayed about what should I talk about this morning. And I decided to do something really simple. I decided to tell you a story. True story. My story. And I'll tell you in a few minutes why I'm telling you this story. But it's a story that begins in atheism. Because I decided at a rather young age that God does not and cannot exist. I just thought the mere concept of an all-powerful, all-knowing, God of the universe, creator of everything, come on, it's crazy. Wasn't even worth my time to check out. Now, granted, I tend to be a skeptical person. My background's in journalism and law. You can imagine, you put those two things together, you can imagine what kind of a skeptic that you get. And I was legal editor of the Chicago Tribune, and we used to pride ourselves on our skepticism. And we wouldn't accept anybody's word at face value. We always wanted at least two sources to confirm a fact before we print it in the newspaper. So we actually had a sign in our newsroom that said, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. How do you know? Maybe she's lying. Got any evidence to back that up? And that's okay. You want journalists to be skeptical, right? Don't you wish sometimes they were more skeptical than they are, right? But my problem was that my skepticism bubbled over into cynicism, and it cemented me into my atheism. Now, because I had no belief in God, I really lacked a moral framework for my life. Now, I'm not saying all atheists are like this. This is the way I tend to be rational. I tend to be logical. So I say, okay, I kind of looked at life and said, okay, if there is no God, if there is no heaven, if there is no hell, if there is no judgment, if there is no ultimate accountability, then the most logical way for me to live my life would be as a hedonist, someone who just pursued pleasure. And that's what I did. So I lived a very immoral and drunken and profane and narcissistic, self-absorbed, really in a lot of ways self-destructive kind of a life. That was my life. What people saw was me winning awards for investigative reporting. What they didn't see was the other side, which was me literally drunk in the snow in an alley on Saturday night. I had so much rage inside of me, so much anger. And if you asked me back then, what's the deal? Why the anger? I couldn't have told you, but looking back, I could see what it was. I was always after the perfect high. I was always after that ultimate experience of pleasure. But guess what? Everything let me down. Nothing lived up to the hype. It's a lot of rage. I remember once Leslie and I got in an argument, and our little daughter was there, and I had so much rage, I just blew up. I remember I reared back, and I kicked a hole right through our living room wall. And Leslie's crying, and my daughter's crying. It's like, hey, that's just another day in the Strobel house. In fact, I'm going to tell you the ugliest thing about me, which is when my little daughter, Allison, was just a toddler. If she was alone in the living room, playing with some toys, some blocks or whatever, and she would hear me come home from work through the front door, her natural reaction was just to gather her toys and go in her room and shut the door. She going to be drunk again? She going to be yelling and screaming and kicking holes in walls? You know what? At least it's nice and quiet in here. Friends, that is the ugliest truth about me. Leslie was, I guess you call her an agnostic, had kind of some vague beliefs in God, but if you saw the movie they did on our life a few years ago, you know what happened. She met a nurse who was a Christian, and they became best friends. And this nurse taught her about Jesus and told her about Jesus. And Leslie was open. She went to church with her. She checked it out. And after many months of checking things out, she came up to me one day and she gave me the worst news an atheist husband could get. She said, Lee, I've decided to become a follower of Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh no, here it comes. It's going to turn into some holy roller or something. I didn't sign up for this. Literally, first word that went through my mind, divorce. I was going to walk out. But I stuck around. And a couple of things happened. In a positive way, I could see the changes in the way she related to me and the children, and it was winsome, it was attractive, and it kind of pulled me toward faith. But at the same time, I wanted the old Leslie back. I wanted our old life back. And so I began to plot, how can I get her out of this cult that she's gotten involved in? And I realized, wait a minute, it would not be hard to get her from this cult. All I have to do is disprove the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because even I, as an atheist, understood the resurrection of Jesus is the linchpin of the Christian faith. It is the foundation of the Christian faith. Why? Because Jesus, in a variety of different ways, directly and indirectly, made transcendent and messianic and divine claims about himself. He claimed to be the Son of God. In fact, at one point, he got up and he said, the Father and I are one. And the Greek word for one there is not masculine, it's neuter, which means Jesus was not saying I and the Father are the same person. He was saying I and the Father are the same thing. We're one in nature. We're one in essence. And how did the audience understand what he was saying? They picked up stones to kill him because they said, you're just a man and you're claiming to be God. So Jesus claimed to be God, but so what? Anybody could claim to be God. I could claim to be God. But if Jesus claimed to be God, died, and then 3 days later rose from the dead, that's pretty good evidence he's telling the truth, right? That's why the resurrection is the linchpin of the Christian faith. It's why the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 17, if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile. You're still in your sins. Friends, this is the ball game. And so I realized, Easter is coming up. Why not talk about a way that you could easily remember what is the historical evidence that Jesus did indeed return from the dead and thus prove he's the Son of God. So what I'm going to do is, I spent 2 years of my life in this investigation. This is what brought me to faith. And I realized you can summarize this evidence very simply using 4 words that begin with the letter E. So it's easy to remember. Easter begins with E, and these 4 words begin with E. So I'm going to kind of teach you in these next few minutes how you can remember what the historical evidence is that Jesus rose from the dead. And who knows, God might open up an opportunity in these next few weeks coming up before Easter to get into a conversation with someone and talk to them about why it is we believe that Jesus is who he claimed to be. So keep in mind, when I did this investigation, I did not give the Bible any special credence. I didn't consider it to be inerrant, inspired, the Word of God. I do now, but I was a skeptic then. But I had to accept the New Testament for what it undeniably is, which is a set of ancient historical writings. And I knew, just as you can investigate any ancient writing, whether it's by Josephus or Tacitus or Suetonius, you can take those same investigative techniques and apply them to the pages of the New Testament to try to determine, is it telling me the truth? And so that's what I did. And so I want to give you now these 4 E's that you can always remember to summarize why we're convinced that Jesus didn't just claim to be the Son of God, but backed it up by returning from the dead. The first E stands for the word execution. You have to have a death first, right, before you can have a resurrection. How do we know Jesus was truly dead? Well, because some people say, well, maybe he fainted on the cross, and then the cool, damp air of the tomb resuscitated him. There's some problems with that. First of all, we have no record anywhere of anyone ever surviving a full Roman crucifixion. Secondly, when we study ancient history, we're lucky if we have 1 or 2 good sources to confirm a fact. So most of what we believe about the ancient world is based on 1 source or maybe 2 sources. And yet for the conviction that Jesus was dead after he was crucified, we have not only multiple sources in the pages of the New Testament, we've also got 5 ancient sources outside the Bible, confirming and corroborating his death. We have Josephus, a first-century Jewish historian who worked for the Romans, Tacitus, another early historian, Meribar Serapion, Lucian. Even the Jewish Talmud admits that Jesus was dead. This is so well established of an historical fact, you would get laughed out of a major academic institution if you went in and said, oh, no, I think Jesus somehow survived the crucifixion. In fact, no less of a source than the Journal of the American Medical Association, a secular, peer-reviewed, scientific medical journal, carried an investigation into the death of Jesus, and this was their conclusion, quote, clearly, the weight of the historical and medical evidence indicates that Jesus was dead even before the wound to his side was inflicted. I mean, this is so well established. You could go to an atheist New Testament scholar like Gerd Ludemann of Vanderbilt University, and he'll tell you this. He'll say, Jesus' death as a consequence of crucifixion is indisputable. Now, I don't know how much you study ancient history, but there are very few facts of ancient history that a skeptical, critical, atheist historian like a Gerhard Ludemann will say is indisputable. One of them is the death of Jesus, the first he is for execution. Jesus was dead.